Well, good morning again, and welcome to the Christmas season. Hope you guys all had a great Thanksgiving. Certainly ate more than we needed to on Thursday. On Friday, we got a lot of exercise. I did a whole bunch of pull-ups. I was actually working cattle, so I found out that the strength that it takes to pull the arm down on the head gate is not enough to pull me off the ground, so that really wasn't a pull-up. But anyway, we hurt in places yesterday that we didn't know we had places, so that should come around, I guess, more often because I need to exercise those muscles. Those are muscles that you don't use normally. We're kicking off a Christmas season with a new series. This is just a 3-4 week deal. It's just a few weeks. But, you know, this is that time of the year when, the commercialization and everything and what happens. I remember every year the same thing. I go into Walmart in September and I look around and I'm like, really? Christmas trees already? And then I'm here, and then I walk in, and I'm looking around and going, oh my gosh, I don't even have my tree up, right? And so the Christmas Eve comes, and I'm in there trying to get things going, and it's like, holy cow, and all this kind of comes all at once. And so I'm really glad that Thanksgiving has its place. I think as we look at a nation, as a government, we set aside these holidays when they're spiritual in nature, and so that tells you a little bit about the origin of our country and where that comes from. But I hope you guys took some time over Thanksgiving to be thankful, to enjoy family, to enjoy some gratitude and some time. I appreciate a few years ago there was kind of a pushback against I call it the intrusion of Black Friday. It was one of those things that, and we kind of got that completely out of control now. But all of a sudden, it kind of spilled from Friday back to Thursday of Thanksgiving week, and then all of a sudden, you're like, well, all these people, if you want to go shopping, they have to work so you can shop, and so it's taking them away from their families. And I realize not everybody can be home. There are people that have to do those things, but I think we were getting away from that. We kind of pulled that back in, so I'm glad to see that happen. And I hope you were able to enjoy some of that. But when we think about the commercialization of Christmas, that's been an issue through the ages. And so one of the things that we, as Christians, as Jesus followers, you hear us say a lot is that, what's the real reason for the season? And so you see the bumper stickers, or you see the sign, or maybe you have one in your house, or maybe you have a shirt that says Jesus is the reason. And I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, that's what we're celebrating is the birth of Christ, and so it makes sense. And so I'm not opposed or offended by that in any shape, form, or fashion. And so go ahead and wear your shirt. I don't think it's a problem. But I think if he were here talking to us, I think he would look at us and go, "You're the reason." Okay, if we weren't so messed up, it wouldn't necessarily. But that's the way it came. Okay, he came for us, and so we become the reason for the season, and so I think we have to kind of accept that a little bit, and I think we have to understand that and own that to the point, and then we start looking at what the real reasons for the season are. And so as we think about this and study this and look at this over the next few weeks, we're just going to look at a few of the big reasons. Okay, and the first one that we're going to look at today takes us all the way back, and I realize we've been back for a while, and so I don't want to rehash anything that we've been talking about over the last few weeks, because this is a completely different context that we look at everything. But over the next few weeks, we're going to explore reasons for the season. And so the first reason that we want to explore takes us all the way back. Okay, takes us all the way back to the beginning, and Steve alluded to that a little bit in the opening before we started our worship set. We've studied Joseph. We've studied a lot of that over the course of 2024. So this is not what that's about, but it goes all the way back to the beginning promise. Okay, it goes back to the beginning promise, and so we're going to look today really at the backstory of Christmas. And it's not just Joseph and his brothers, and it's not just that. It starts with Abraham and goes through the entire Old Testament, okay? And so we're not going to be able to go in depth in that, but we just want to look at that promise and that story. Because the story of Christmas doesn't start with the story of a young couple who are pregnant looking for a place to have their child born. The story of Christmas goes back 2,000 years before that. Okay, so you think about that. We look back to Christmas, the first Christmas. We look back to the birth of Jesus. We look through that through lenses that are 2,000 years old, right? We look through that as a 2,000-year-old story. But the the beginning of the Christmas story goes back 4,000 years. And so from their perspective, in that first Christmas, they're looking back to a promise that was given 2,000 years earlier. And so I want you to kind of feel the weight of that. And this is a familiar passage, I get it, but I want to go back and look to see where this started, to remind ourselves of the reasons for the season. Genesis chapter 12, beginning with verse 1. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, your father's household, to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great." We're talking about Abraham 4,000 years later. Okay, obviously promises are fulfilled, right? And you will be a blessing. Now here's where it gets a little different. "I will bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. And all of the people on earth," all of the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, for a guy living in the wilderness, living out in this land 4,000 years ago, in that context, in that world that he was living in, a world very different from the world that we live, a world that doesn't have high-speed communication and high-speed transportation. I'm just looking for a kid, all right? Because the Christmas story doesn't begin with a couple that's trying to find a place to have a baby. It begins with a couple who are wanting a baby and can't have one. And so this is the promise that God gives to him. He's like, we're going to take care of that. All in my time. All, not in your time, but on my time. And then through that, I'm going to bless the whole world through you. No way he could get his head around that. No way he could understand that. But that's where it starts. So 2,000 years before the first Christmas, God calls Abram. He gives him a promise. All people on earth, think about this. All people on earth will be blessed. All people on earth will be better off because of you. Isn't that a promise? All people on earth will be better off because of you. That's amazing. That's wild. When you look at the time frame of when he's living, God said, "I'm going to build you into a nation that will bless all the people on the earth." This is a context and a time frame when nations didn't bless nations. No nation showed up on another nation's doorstep with their army and said, "Hey, we're here to bless you," right? "We've come to bless you." No, they came and conquered you. They came and took over you. They come and plundered you. They come and enslaved you and carried you off and took what was good and murdered you. That's what nations did to other nations. And so we were always in this defense mode. And so that was not normal. To say you're going to become a nation and you are going to bless all the people on earth. Completely foreign concept. Completely foreign concept. Now, like I said, we studied a lot about Abraham in the past year, and we studied a lot about Joseph and really dove into that. But when you go through this story, that where we left Joseph and his brothers and where we left that family last week, and that we you know the story. If you know the story of the Israelite people, Egypt is where they became a nation. In the time frame that they were in Egypt, over the next 400 years, where we left off last week, they grow into a huge nation, and this is where Moses comes in. Moses leads them out in the Exodus, and then they come back into the original land that God had given to Abram. And so they grow into the nation of Israel, and they inhabit the land. Lots of things there. I invite you to read it and study it, but this is where it all unfolds. And so all of this takes place, and they all come in, and so all of the things, and when you read that story, I mean, come on. What a mess. I mean, really, it's a mess. And so when you look at a nation that is called by God, that is promised by God, that has been set up by God, and to be a nation that's going to bless all the people, and you start reading through it, 1,000 years of history, and you look at them and you go, what? And it's one failure after another. It's one mess after another. And God will punish them, and then so it's just time after time. They go astray from the path of God, and then tragedy strikes, exiles happen, kingdoms rise and fall, kings come up, kings go down. Even in the good times, King David and King Solomon, what a couple of guys, right? Read their story. Go back and read their story. My goodness, they're just a lot like us, right? But when you look at the context of the nation, it's like, well, during King Solomon's time, there was some money. Okay, it was a good time. The wealth of Solomon was unmatched to anything that we know of on the earth today. The wealth of King Solomon was unmatched to any kingdom, any place, any government, any nation that we have today. It was unbelievable. And even in that time frame, even in that context, Israel did not bless all the nations on earth. The promise was not fulfilled even in that time. So what happens when we look at it, in the time of Solomon, it's been 1,000 years. From the time the promise was given to Abram, 1,000 years to King Solomon. So we're in the middle. 1,000 years has passed. There's 1,000 years more to come before the first Christmas. And what does Solomon do with all of his wealth and all of his wisdom and all of his... He marries the daughters of all the surrounding nations. He worships the gods of surrounding nations. And before long, instead of blessing those nations, the nation of Israel becomes just like the nations around them that they were supposed to bless. And what does God do? He judges them. He judges the nation. He divides the nation. And so you look at Israel and go, and you missed it. You had the opportunity. He built you up. Now you're this. You got this big temple. You got all the things, all the gold, all the stuff. And then you had an opportunity and you blew it. You blew the opportunity that you had to bless other people. And so it's over. But God is a promise keeper. God is a promise keeper. And so in the midst of the chaos, and like I said, it would take weeks to read through it all. But you just look at story after story after story. Exiles, in, out, kingdoms up, kingdoms down. In the midst of all of that, God would raise up prophets. He would raise up prophets, and prophet after prophet would remind the nation, hey, I know this looks rough. I know you're in the midst of crazy. I know you're in the midst of chaos. But let me remind you, there's a promise. There is a promise. And so prophets would come, and this would happen. And they would remind us that God is going to keep the promise that He made to Abraham. Isaiah was one of those prophets. He was one of those prophets. Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 6. This is what Isaiah said. It is too small a thing for you to be my servant to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. And then he says, I will also make you a light for the Gentiles. In the midst of chaos, okay, he's telling them, I'm going to make you a light for the Gentiles. What? I will make you a light for the Gentiles that my salvation will reach the ends of the earth. Now, think about that context. It's like, that's impossible. But think about us today. This is so small. This is so simple. I walk in this morning. You walk in this morning. You pick up a program. You open up the program. There's a prayer guide. You thumb through that prayer guide, and there's 7 days there. And as you thumb through that, nation after nation, part of earth, part of earth, part of earth, from Brazil to the Middle East, a light to the Gentiles. It happened. It happened. They couldn't even see the context. Isaiah's like, yep, it's going to happen. And they're looking at their world and looking at their life and going, I don't get it. I don't understand how it could be possible. I don't understand how it could even be possible. Nobody is feeling blessed at this point. Okay? Nobody's feeling blessed. When this message of this prophet, when Isaiah made this prophecy, the economy of Israel was in shambles and they were in no position to be a blessing to anybody, much less the Gentiles. Basically, they were largely unimpressed with Israel's God. They were largely unimpressed. It's like, there's some cool stories. There's a lot of history. But everything looks like it's falling apart. Nobody's feeling blessed. Nobody's thinking the promise that was made to Abraham all those years ago was actually going to happen. And then, around 436 BC, 1,600 years after God made the promise to Abraham, Malachi shows up. Malachi the prophet shows up, and this is what he says. Malachi chapter 1, verse 11. This is what he says. My name will be great among the nations. Where? From where the sun rises to where it sets. In every place, incense and pure offerings will be brought to me, because my name will be great among the nations, says the Lord Almighty. They heard these words. This is 436 years before Jesus was born. They heard these words and they thought, that's impossible. I mean, Zeus, his name may be great. Alexander is going to come along. Obviously, his name was great. But not us. It's a mess. We're in shambles. We're in no position to bless anybody. And so I don't think anybody took Malachi seriously, and we probably wouldn't have either. And then we go into a period of time where there's 400 years where there's nothing. There's no word whatsoever at all. And then, to add insult to injury, this is what happens historically. This is not in your scripture, but this is what happens historically in the nation of Israel. About 63 BC, shortly before the birth of Christ, Pompey comes and he comes into Judah. He takes the city of Jerusalem by force. He murders half of the priesthood, and then he annexes the entire region into the Roman Empire. And so now we have the Roman occupation of Judea. Folks, this was the lowest of low. This is the lowest of low. If you're ever in a position as a country, if you're ever in a position as a nation to be able to bless the whole world, this was not the time. From their perspective, they're looking at it and going, yeah, this is hopeless. This is hopeless. I mean, we are under Roman occupation. We can't do anything now. We have absolutely no way to do anything for anybody. And so if you're part of the history of Israel, if you're in this place, there's three conclusions that you come to pretty quick. Number one, all nations are not going to be blessed through Abraham. It's not going to happen. Israel would not be a light to the Gentiles. And our God's not going to be worshipped throughout the world because nobody's interested in a God who was too weak to take care of his own people. And the whole thing is a mess. And so that's where they were. That's the context that they're in. That's the place where Israel was at. And so it's at this point. It's at this point when things are hopeless, when things are more hopeless than they've ever been, when seemingly God's promise was hopelessly out of reach. God moves. He moves. The Apostle Paul, having been a fine Jew, a Pharisee, one who studied this prophecy, one who had read it all, and now as he looked at it through the lenses of being a Jesus follower, having met Jesus on the road to Damascus, having had his life transformed, and he went back and reviewed the promise to Abraham and all of the Israelite history that he had been taught since he was a child, then he was able to write it this way. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, he says, when the set time had fully come. But it looks like the worst time. Paul, it looks like the most hopeless time. It looks like a disaster. Oh, but it's his time, isn't it? It's the set time had fully come. And then you look at it through those lenses and you're like, why? Why would God do it this way? Why would he do it this way? You see, it had long been prophesied that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. What did God do? He used the Roman Empire to move his people, to move Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem at the time of the birth. Okay? We know that it was during the reign of Augustus Caesar. Why? Because God used him. He's like, we're gonna have a census. All right? We're going to do this, and we're going to do this right now. Okay? Listen. Caesar Augustus, the reason you know his name is because he's a footnote in the story of King Jesus. All right? He's a footnote in the story of King Jesus that God used that. And see, this is what God was all about. God was looking at what his purpose and his plan was. He doesn't really care about all the chaos. He doesn't really care. He has a purpose and a plan. And so when the set time had fully come, in the time of an expanding empire that was exporting a common culture and a common language with a highway system and a seaport system that connected the world to every population center, unlike anything that the world had ever seen before, God says, this will be a good time to send a gospel message to the world. And the Romans will build the way to take it. Thank you. You see, God's timing is always His timing. And when we look at it from a narrow lens and think that it's completely impossible, everything's possible with Him. It was when God's time had fully come that He sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, to a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And that ends a 2,000-year backstory to the Christmas story. And God was present in all of it. He was present in all of it, and He had a plan in all of it, and His plan never veered. His plan never. There was never a time in Israel's time of falling away and exiling and all of the chaos and all of. There was never a time that God looked at it and went, wow, you all have made this so bad I can never do this. He never looked at it and said, you all have messed this up so bad that I'm not going to be able to bless the world through you. He never looked at it that way. He was right on time. It was right on time. It was moving in the direction that He knew it was going to move all the time. And He knew it. The powerful kingdoms of the Babylonians and the Persians, they rose and they fell. Alexander the Great's kingdom had been carved up and diminished. And God's making His point. The kingdoms of this world do not have the power to bless the world. Okay? The kingdoms of this world doesn't have the power to bless the world. Let's jump ahead just a moment into the life of Jesus and look at this through this context. Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 and 10, because this has a lot of traction here. In verse 8 he says, "Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all of the kingdoms of the world and their splendor." This was when Jesus went into the wilderness to be tempted of Satan, and he's out there for 40 days, and then Satan comes, and he takes him to this mountain, and he shows him all of the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And then he says, "All this I will give you if you will bow down and worship me." And Jesus said to him, "Get away. Away from me, Satan, for it's written, worship the Lord your God and serve Him only." You see, that's not why He came. That's not why He came. He didn't come to assume the command of a network of failed kingdoms filled with peacekeepers. Jesus was a peacemaker. He was a peacemaker. He didn't come to conquer the world. He came to bless it. He came to bless the world by giving His life for the world, to demonstrate the way forward for the world. And Luke describes for us the visit of the angel to Mary. In Luke chapter 1, verse 28, the angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored, the Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you found favor with God. You will conceive, give birth to a son, and you are to call Him Jesus. He will be great. He will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give Him the throne of His father David, and He will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. And Israel will be a light to the world." The God of Israel would keep His promise. God kept His promise. And today, the God of Israel is being worshiped throughout the world. It's happening right now. It's happening in every nation around the globe. So that's the backstory to the Christmas story. It's fascinating. It's amazing. It's inspiring. But when you read it and you hear it, it's also convicting. Because here's our walking point this morning. If the arrival of Jesus into the world was to be and is and was a blessing to the whole world, then shouldn't we, as Jesus' followers, be a blessing to the world as well? So are you? Am I? Are we? And if Jesus is the light of the world, shouldn't our collective presence on the world make the world brighter? I'm really glad you're here this morning because it gives me an opportunity to encourage you. Okay? Because I believe you are. I believe we are. And I think we need to realize that. I think we need to realize that. Because sometimes we do it and we don't even think about it. We don't even realize it. When I came here just a couple of months ago and said, hey, there's a bunch of backpacks sitting up here on the stage, and if you guys will take one home and take the instructions inside and fill it, bring it back, we're going to pray over it, and we're going to take it and send it, and it's going to go to a child. And you're going to bless the child through your efforts, through your sacrificial giving, through your time, through your money. You blessed a child. You may not be able to see them right now, but children were blessed as a result of that. And then the next week I came up and said, hey guys, there's a whole bunch of shoe boxes that are stacked up here on the stage. If you'll take those shoe boxes, the instructions on the inside, if you'll fill those shoe boxes, bring those back, we're going to ship those shoe boxes out. And a missionary somewhere is going to take those shoe boxes and they're going to take them to a child and they're going to hand them to the child. The child's going to open it, receive a gift, receive the gospel message, and that child is going to be blessed through you in another nation somewhere around the world. Congratulations. You're being a blessing. Okay? You're being a blessing. But can we be more? I think so. I think so. I think we can do more. I'm encouraged when I think about how when we give to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, when we support a mission, when you give to your offering, when you tithe to this church, a percentage of everything that's given to this church goes to support our missionaries. There's a lot of homes in America that did not have their children at their table because they're serving in another land, blessing other people through the gospel, and you help keep them there. You're blessing other nations and you're blessing other people. Don't forget that, okay? It's bigger than just making a monetary donation. It's the prayers that go with it. It's the prayers that go behind it that become a blessing to other people. Backpacks, shoe boxes, mission trips, supporting missionaries, giving, going. And what about here at home? Listen, 'tis the season. But what are the reasons? Reason number one is be a blessing. Be a blessing. Let me challenge you. Over these next few weeks, as we approach Christmas, open your eyes, look around you, and think and ask the question, how can I be a blessing to those that are around me? How can I be a greater blessing to the people that I work with, the people that I go to school with, the people that I pass on the street, the people that I shop with? How can I be a greater blessing to those that are around me? How can you bless others? Listen, you can't be a blessing. You can't give unless you first received. Okay? If you don't have the gift of salvation, if you've never received Christ as your Lord and Savior, if you're not a Christ follower, then you don't have a gift to give. All right? You don't have a blessing to give away. So let me invite you first. If you're here today and you've never said yes to the relationship that He offers, say yes. All right? That's the whole purpose. That's the purpose. That's the gift that we have. But if you're a Christ follower, be a blessing. He'll show you. Trust me. The number of people that you will encounter between now and Christmas is astounding. The number of face-to-face meetings that you have with the people that are around you, for some it's a lot more than others. My goodness, I'll have hundreds of people that I'll be in contact with every day. Every time I walk into a building of 1,000 students, you have an opportunity to bless those that are around you. Sometimes it's a smile, sometimes it's conversation, sometimes it's a gift, sometimes it's food. So whatever it is, be a blessing to those that are around you. Be a blessing. Find a way. And God will direct you in your path. But you can't be a blessing until you've received the gift in the first time. And so if you haven't, let today be that moment. Let me pray for you. Father, we thank you so much. It's amazing.